Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to do just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another Leadership Conversations podcast episode. I am so excited for today's guest. Today we have Lindsay Hua, the VP of Global Deployment at Afiniti, and Lindsay has 2 decades of track record as a global technology leader. She has grown her career in various industries such as consumer packaged goods with Procter Gamble,
hardware and software services, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, telecommunications, T-Mobile USA, and currently she's working at a unicorn company that focuses on artificial intelligence, Afiniti. Throughout her career, she has played many technology roles from system analyst, project leader, service delivery manager, digital transformation lead, product and solutions lead, head of DevOps, and most recently, global deployment executive leader. Each role played a part on how she grew as a woman leader in the technology space today, which I can't wait to ask her about. She's also currently an executive board member for Ignite Worldwide, a non-profit organization whose mission is to bridge the gender gap and bring equitable education and career opportunities to young girls and women around the world. This non-profit organization has served over 80,000 young girls around the world and is expanding its footprint. She's worked in several countries such as Philippines, Poland, Canada, and now in the USA. She now lives in Seattle, Washington with her husband and 2 young kids. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me, Jono. Happy to be here.
Well, it's a joy to have you on the podcast, and I've just got more excited reading out your bio because I have to admit there's so many topics in there that there's, and I haven't even teed this up with you outside of this, but maybe we'll need to do a couple of rounds down the track because there's so many things in there in your leadership story that I can't wait to explore. But why don't we start there? You can go as far back as you want. Tell us the Lindsay story of how you came to be the leader you are today, doing what you're doing.
Okay, sounds good. So I would probably start it back in 2002. I was just fresh off college. I took management engineering as my college course, although I was really a computer science geek by heart, and I was really looking forward to getting into the technology space. And back then, I started my career as a systems analyst for Procter Gamble and did really well. So in terms of like that was my first job, super excited, tried to do everything and anything I could get my hands into and volunteering for a lot of stuff. I was actually awarded like the best female leader award there during my first year, which was great. And wow. I figured that during that time, I had a knack for teaching and helping out other new members in the organization since we were pretty much expanding quite a bit. And I was based in the Philippines back then, by the way. So yep. I started taking on team leadership roles, even as an individual contributor in an enterprise company, and didn't really think so much about pay raise yet, or at least not yet, but just having that sense of fulfillment of helping people grow in their career, even though I was like new myself. And so what happened was, through the first few years of that career, I kind of figured out that, hey, I really enjoy being more than just an individual contributor. I think I really want to be a people leader in the organization. And so that it started as mentoring and coaching one person and into getting up to 40 people that are now reaching out to me for help. And I also got additional responsibilities in managing those teams, to the point where I actually had to ask my manager, saying, hey, I think I deserve to be moved up to a people manager role. It didn't go through as smoothly as I wanted in that first conversation, and I can tell you more about that later. But what happened was, through different forms and methods of conversations, difficult as it seems, I was they finally saw my value to the organization, and I got promoted there as a people manager. And I think that's where I felt more at ease with myself and my career, and grew there from a people leader in P&G. And then when I moved to Hewlett-Packard, actually, I was relocated here to the United States and got localized here for the role. I was playing a service delivery manager role, where I was managing 3 different teams across several countries. And so Poland was one of them. I also manage teams from Ireland, from India, and from the US. So it's a cross-cultural team, which I really enjoy learning a lot from everybody's culture.
Mm.
And after that, during that time, actually, that's when I met my spouse, and when we decided to have a family, I took a pause from work for half a year and came back again and still looking for a leadership role, and then eventually moving from Hewlett-Packard to T-Mobile, which is a telecoms company.
Yep.
T-Mobile, I've stayed with T-Mobile for the last 10 years, I would say, from 2011 to 2020.
Yep.
And to be honest, it was my first time moving to a telco industry, and I had nothing, no, I had to start from scratch in terms of knowledge about the industry. But where I knew I was really strong at was my leadership capabilities, and that's where my supervisors, my bosses understood where my strength was, and so they actually gave me quite a bit of responsibilities in that department that I was managing. And I was managing over 400 resources across the globe. And
Wow.
even if I had to learn the ropes myself, trying to figure out my way, learning about the industry and the technology. And that was exciting and challenging, both. And that's where I actually moved up to a more senior leadership position, which I really enjoyed, getting stretched assignments and getting bigger and better challenges. And then last year, T-Mobile actually had an company merge with another company called Sprint, and they merged as one company. And it was during that time when I was trying to think through, like, what do I want to do when I grew up? And at that time, they also gave an opportunity for me to, either stay within the organization, but maybe do something different, or find something else outside. And, I know that it was during the pandemic, and it was probably one of the harder times to find new jobs, but I thought about it and took the leap to move to a different role, where I am now. So now with Afiniti, this is a unicorn company that does artificial intelligence, and they, optimize pairings between two human beings. I found that really fascinating, and it's like right up my alley, where trying to push myself towards innovation. And so that's where I am right now, doing deployments for customers across the globe.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love how the current role that you're in brings you back to Lindsay. Some of that, maybe some of that Lindsay in university doing the computer science, and that part of Lindsay that that for so many years it's been Lindsay, the people leader and leadership, and now you're sort of obviously still getting to do that, but with I'd have to say artificial intelligence would have to be one of the most exciting spaces right now in technology. And so if you love technology, it must be a fascinating space to be working in.
It is. Every time I'm in a room surrounded with data scientists and AI engineers, I feel like I'm probably one of the least knowledgeable person in the room, and I learn so much from them. I learn every single day.
Yeah, amazing. I want to go back to that conversation you had with your manager because I relate so much. That in that first job, which was that with Procter Gamble? Was that the first job where you?
Yes.
Yeah, and I relate so much because I think of myself having conversations. Younger Jono having conversations, and I just think, I just went in thinking it was going to go so well, and now I look in hindsight and I can see. I can see things now that I didn't see at the time. But what is it? I guess I'm particularly interested to ask for leaders out there who might have, their ears might have, they might have just gone, "Ooh, that's interesting." Had a conversation with their boss because they were feeling like they're taking on more responsibility than maybe they have in their position description, and want to go about in the best way possible, and in the right way. How do I ask for a pay rise? So tell us what happened in that conversation and what you've learned from it.
Yeah, so at that time, I was still individual contributor, and I wanted to become the next level was a people leader role called manager,
Hmm.
and it comes with a pay raise and additional benefits as well, like stocks and rewards and all that. And it wasn't my primary um, it wasn't my primary motivation, I would say, but I felt that with the job that I was doing as a people leader, I think of people leader separate from manager. So manager is more of like the title, but the people leader is really how you exude in your day-to-day work life, deal with people. And that's where I really thrive and I really enjoy. And I had a conversation with my manager back then and said, look, I've been managing 3 teams already, and I feel like I've been able to grow them from scratch, build them from ground up, and build them, and working, across different cultures and global locations. I feel like I deserve to get promoted to the manager role because I am already doing it, and it's not like It's not like I just, started doing that role. It's been something that I've been doing for several months, and I feel like my performance has been well received by my peers, by the people who still indirectly report to me, but functional wise, I've been playing the manager role for them. And the response that I got was, well, we really don't have an opening yet, and we really think that you're great, but until we have an opening, you just have to stick to your current role and stick to the same, salary that you have. We'll try to raise it in the next merit increase. And so I was kind of, demotivated after that. I'm like, why am I doing all this? I get a sense of fulfillment on one hand, but the other thing is I don't feel that it's being recognized. So that frustration kind of led to me starting to look for work outside. And I
Hmm.
actually found another company. It was actually IBM, that offered me a manager role with just one interview. And in the back of my mind, I was like, how come with Procter and Gamble, where I've worked for several years, they see me day in and day out, but they don't seem to recognize the value that I provide. But with this company that I applied for, they were, after just having one conversation, they were willing to even offer me the job right away, and they were flexible with my terms. And
Yeah.
so I spoke back with my manager and said, look, I have now this offer and I'm planning to resign. I haven't really accepted the other offer yet because I was hoping to still stay because I really love the people that I work with. That
Hmm.
was what held me back in the current company back then. And after some negotiations, my boss was a female manager, and I actually thought that she would have, be on my side at the get go, but apparently not. But then she came back and said, look, she had to work some things out and actually uh, match the offer that I got, which on one hand, I was happy that they matched it, but the other hand was, it didn't really have to go to that level or to that
Hmm.
situation in order for her to realize it. In the end, I actually rescinded the offer of the other company that I was applying for and stayed with my team because really I there were so many things that I still wanted to do and grow my
Yes.
team for. And it was a happy decision for me in the end. And actually that manager that I was reporting to became eventually my peer, and I actually overcame. I had another promotion, which led to me being at a higher level than she was. So that's the end of that story. It was bittersweet, but I think it worked out in the end.
Yeah, I think um, looking back on that, so if you had Lindsay back then across the table from you and you were giving advice, is there anything you would have done differently in how you would have gone about it as the employee going to your manager and having that conversation?
I think I would have been better prepared, in terms of like, writing down the facts of my accomplishments. Back then, I think I was writing a lot. A lot of the emotions was still riding on me having that
Mm.
conversation. And I can still remember that time, like how how I was trying to like hold myself from bursting out in tears.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, just preparing. I think if I had a chance to talk to my old self, I'd say prepare. Think about your accomplishments. Don't forget your strengths, and use that to have an objective conversation with your
mm,
manager and get other leaders as well to support that. So that's one thing that I learned a little later throughout the years, was that getting support and advocates from other leaders, not just your immediate manager, is very key, because then you have the backing and support of more people that
yes.
would say, yes, I believe in Lindsay, and yes, she definitely deserves this new title.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. And what about putting yourself in the shoes of your manager at the time? I found it so interesting the way you told that story, because some of the things she said were, in and of themselves, positive things. You're doing great. We'll see what we can do. It wasn't like she said, no, you're not performing. It was like she encouraged you in what you're doing, but just shut the door on the opportunity, which to actually move up. And I guess there's a little bit of justice in that as well. Going, well, this is the job I'm already doing. How can you might not have the placement yet for it, but I'm already doing that job. What would you do in her shoes? What have you learned? And I'm sure you've been in those shoes different times now, where you've had employees come to you.
Yeah.
What could a leader do who's listening, who has a really great employee who's sort of knocking at the door, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I that's actually a great thing. I never thought of that actually. Like, what if I was in her shoes? How would I handle it differently? I think it's very tough, especially knowing that part of it is succession planning. Like, if I was a manager and I had a group of really talented individuals, some of them have the potential to become really good people leaders.
Hmm.
Like having to invest time, like I normally would have regular one-on-ones and syncs with my direct reports and even other people that is just looking for mentorship or coaching. So I would really welcome that. I On hindsight, I believe that I remember having those conversations with my manager back then, but having conversations about career growth would probably happen like once, if not twice a year. And if
Hmm.
I was the manager doing succession planning and I noticed that maybe, Lindsay back then is a potential leader in the future, setting expectations the right way ahead of time would have helped, versus getting and just making sure that in those conversations, whether it's one-on-one about work, about career growth, that those types of expectations are set beforehand. Because I think that was the missing piece back then, was we really never had like a pep talk about career growth. And we were told that we were always told that, hey, we need to have a position open, you need to apply for it, go through the formal process. And that conversation was more like an HR training, basically, rather than having a one-to-one personal connection and telling them what you really want to do. A few years from now, you've been in the role for several years, you've been doing team leadership role or acting as a manager, even if you don't have the title. Is that something that you're really working towards for? And then I, as a manager, could work with my leaders as well and say, hey, I think we should start thinking about opening a requisition or a position for this role. There could have been earlier planning as well on hindsight about it.
Yeah, I think earlier planning, more open communication, building that connection, because I think if you felt more connected with her, and there was a bit more, it sounds like you didn't feel understood by her as well.
Yeah.
There was a sense that she said, yeah, you're doing great, there's just no position open now, and you're there going, but I'm already doing the position. I just want it formalized. And so that,
Yeah.
yeah, that communication is. It's funny how often things come down to communication. We can be so busy, but if you're managing people, if you can communicate better and more regularly, and really if you can minimize miscommunications and build connection, it sounds so simple, but it's interesting that came back to that point. Let me ask you about that, because I love the journey you've been on, and the way that you've obviously seen in yourself a strength of leading people. This might be a bit of a hard question to answer. It's a bit philosophical, maybe, but what are the most important things as a people leader? You know, to leading people really well. Now that you've worked in different countries, you've worked with different teams. I know so many leaders who go, "I want to get better at that." What are some of the most important things to lead people really well?
I think listening is one of the key important attributes of a leader. So when I think of a leader, it's somebody that's serving your members or you're serving your team. There used to be this, with my earlier work experience, I used to think like if you have a leader, you just wait for directions and instructions, and then you just go. You follow the marching orders. But I felt that when I became my own leader and managing my own team, I felt like giving them the ability, some autonomy and some ability to decide for themselves and be creative and be open and honest with you is allows for a better chance for creating a high performing team versus the fact that you as a leader are just providing orders or instructions for the team to follow through. It feels like there's that fear factor that I was trying to eliminate. There is a level of differentiation between respect and fear, where you respect your leader, but at the same time, you're not fearful of voicing out your concerns and allowing your employees to be able to voice out and challenge you if that's really going to help better the organization in the future. So I think listening and the ability to be open to these types of feedback, good or bad, is going to be key, is key as a leader for me. And the other piece that I think of a leader is knowing your people in terms of their personality, what works for them, what's their culture or mindset like. I think that's something that's understood, but not really not really well invested in a lot of the times. So sometimes you would inherit a team and you would just, go about your day and just do the things, do all the deliverables that your team is supposed to do, and just think of it as more like a 9 to 5 job. But if it's something that you really are passionate about in terms of how do I grow my team to becoming better versions of themselves, future leaders, somebody that would replace me in the future, then I would invest time learning more about the team, invest time in building a good relationship across each other, so that when the time comes that I, let's say, move up, move out, find a different adventure, that team can self-sustain themselves, and that team can still maintain the same amount of quality performance that I would expect any team to do.
Yeah, that's really profound. I love what you said about listening and being open, and also really, really coming to understand people and understand their culture and understand them, not just absorb them into the existing fold of what you're doing and keep on doing it, but really seek to understand them. I'm working with a leader at the moment, and we just had a conversation the other day around how do you stay open when you've got a star employee who's really wanting to fly in a particular direction, and there's this tension as a leader where you go, I want to give them lots of space because I know they're excellent, but at the same time I'm worried that in 6 months, 6 months down the track, we'll realize that they've actually gone outside the strategy. How do you balance being really open with keeping the people on your team on strategy?
That's really a tough one. Let me think about that. I think I am trying to remember. I've had a similar situation with somebody who's a superstar, like a real rock star, and that person is struggling to move up. So that he was really great individually, and he really wanted to become a people leader. However, the piece of being a people leader requires you to actually be, like I mentioned earlier, like listen to your team members, not over talk them, but allowing them to be able to speak for themselves and provide their inputs and feedback. And even though that person's mentality was just, I just have to be a people leader because that's the next step. If I stay here in my role, I'm just stuck as an individual contributor all this time. So the intention was slightly misconstrued and slightly like misunderstood, maybe by me as a manager, but I would give him opportunities to allow him to be a people leader, but also understanding and not over promising anything, saying that, look, I want you to get this experience and I want you to tell me back whether that works for you or whether you have challenges. And his view of leadership also had to be adjusted a bit, because his view of leadership is kind of like, hey, I'm giving you instructions and you have to deliver. And it's kind of like one-sided. And that part, which is a really like more of a soft skill really, but harder to go through as an experience, especially if you have been somebody who has been really strong individually. And
Yes.
so in the end, what happened was, after several conversations, several opportunities for that person to become a people leader, not by title, but at least through experience, I still had, to have a hard conversation with him saying, look, this was a good experience. The feedback that I got from everybody else who you actually, played a functional leadership role said that, it wasn't working out in a way that they felt that they were suppressed, or they didn't have the ability to speak out, and really were not, they would have hoped to have gotten more and better guidance, but they didn't. And I asked him as well, and he also had some struggles as well. So it's more like trying to make the person realize by himself, some of the challenges and obstacles, and versus trying to force your opinion or your decision on him, hoping in that conversation it would come out as a realization for that person as well. It doesn't necessarily come out in just one conversation. It's probably a series of conversations, and just having the person see a 360 view of everything, because he probably has just a partial view of what he thinks of himself. Yes. Versus what everybody else thinks of him, and same with the managers. And I was telling him, I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, and I want you to have all the experience that you need, but you also need to be open to hear back from what everybody else thinks about the experience. And finally, after he realized that, then he kind of changed his mind to stick to an individual contributor role that he was really good at, and he was excelled and highly respected for.
Yeah, that's excellent. What I'm hearing in that, as well as the 360, is that there were some really clear goalposts in terms of having people, and maybe getting some feedback from people was the way to do that, and getting his feedback. So to give him an opportunity and go, well, here you go, here's an opportunity, and we're going to also have some really clear feedback and measurables on that, so that there's a learning as you go, which for him ended up actually leading him to think maybe I'm better staying in the individual contributor space.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I actually even, suggested him to reach out and have, leader mentors that he could bounce off ideas with. So not just lean on me as his manager, but also lean on other leaders that I was able to connect him, introduce him, and make sure that they were able to give him, sounding board opportunities as well, which he took advantage of all of it. And I think the realization when it came to like everybody had consistent feedback, and that's where it kind of dawned on him and saying, oh yeah, I'm probably good where I'm at right now. Trying to force myself to a people manager role because the mindset has shifted, versus thinking like, people manager is the only way to go because it's the only way to get up the career ladder, versus thinking, hey, there are opportunities for me to expand in my current role where I don't necessarily have to move to a people leadership role.
Yeah, excellent. That's a great story. Thank you. I'm interested to know about how you managed moving countries. Having kids as a leader. In terms of how, what have you learnt about well-being and work-life balance through your career so far with those different elements, and anything else you want to share?
Sure. So with country moves, the most interesting experience I had was when I moved to Poland, because everybody there spoke Polish. That was their primary language, and English wasn't as common yet. And back then, we didn't have cell phones that you could do Google Translate, for example. So language is a huge barrier for me, and I actually had to study a little bit of basic Polish in order to be able to get my way through. I spent there over a month time, and I was just, and wanted really to not just go to and from work, but also try to explore the city by myself. So I would have a lot of colleagues that thankfully speak speak English really well as well, and they would bring me out from time to time, and that help put some more sanity and balance in terms of it's not just work all the time, but I can at least enjoy some of the evenings and weekends around. And I was single back then, so that was great. I had a lot of flexibility. But I think the language piece was the one that on hindsight, if I could change one thing or at least adjust one thing, I would probably be more well prepared in that aspect. And also learning about the city. So at that time, I just had the assumption that, it's a different city, and I've never really worked outside of Philippines back then, and I was like put my guard down. And so what happened was there was a period back then where I was, riding the bus, didn't really know better, and actually, got some of my stuff stolen from me, which I didn't even know until I got back to the hotel. And
wow.
that included a lot of my valuables. And having thought like, I didn't realize it would happen to this country where, I thought that I had this false assumption of security when I had, and that probably was one of the things that I could have learned a little bit earlier, planned for a little better. And then just talking to my colleagues back then, they said, yep, that's actually pretty common. You just need to make sure that you're, well prepared, not put all your valuables on one area, make sure that it's kind of spread out. That was a lesson learned from me that I never even bothered to ask about it until it happened to me. But thankfully, I got a lot of support from my company and from my colleagues who helped me get sorted out. And so I was able to stay the rest of my time in Poland before going back to my home country and, go through life as usual. But that was, I think, easier than moving to the US. So with the US, when I got localized, I was newly married back then. So not only did I have to adjust to a new country, but also adjust from being single to being married. And I think, and we didn't have a home back then. We had to look for a house that first month that I came, and trying to figure out the lay of the land, adjusting to the weather as well. It was one of the worst winters when I moved here in the US. So moving from a tropical country to the worst winter of all time in the US, it was like a big culture shock for me. Not knowing how just trying to learn how the public transportation works. So it was a lot of adjustments for me. And I think after that first few months, I made a decision not to stay in that city anymore, and was looking for an excuse to find work that had better environment, a city that has better public transportation, or a city that I could thrive, both from a work aspiration perspective and also where I would where I and my husband would raise my family. So back then I was actually in Cincinnati, Ohio,
Yep.
and that first month was a month of adjustment. We I would work, regular hours through the day, and at night I was building furnitures that I bought from IKEA because the townhouse that we rented had no furnitures whatsoever. So we would like sleep in the floor for the first week until we had a bed, and try to get takeout food because we didn't have any kitchen appliances. So
Oh, wow.
it was an interesting ride, and really after we settled for after a few months, when things got settled, then that's the time that we decided, hey, why not? We were really thinking about starting a family, and fortunately, my first child actually was born in Cincinnati as well, and I think when she was born, that's when I realized really that building a family, we really wanted a place that has a lot of great diversity and it's closer to family or relatives and friends. And Seattle was one of the places that ticked off that mark. And my husband and I were in this silly competition where we said, okay, let's apply to companies that are based in Seattle. And there were 3 other cities that we were looking for.
Yeah.
We said, okay, San Francisco was one, New York was another, and the third one was Texas. And we're like, whoever finds a job first, that's where we'll all move. And interestingly enough, my husband found a job in Seattle, and I actually found a job in Texas. And we were thinking which company works better. And in the end, we decided that his opportunity was much better, and that was the place where we had closer relatives, closer friends. And so we decided to move here over 10 years ago, and have not looked ever since elsewhere. And I had my second kid here. And during the time when I had my maternity leave, I took 6 months off work, and it was really to allow myself and my husband to really reflect on how do we really want to build our family, and not just do the maternity leave and go back to work and do things the same way as we were used to, but it was intentional for us to really make a change, and that investment of time was I think worth it.
Yeah, I think that's I love that story. I particularly love the competition you and your husband had. That's just I just love that, and it's like winner takes all. Whoever gets the job first, the other one has to just find a job there too. That's just that's just gorgeous. So yeah, so Seattle. It's funny for me. One of my my sister and I, when we were growing up, one of the movies that was I probably watched 30 times was Sleepless in Seattle. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Yeah. So I have to admit that is a majority of what I know about Seattle is my my growing up. But it's so lovely that you found a place that you love so much. So through through those seasons of maternity leave and now as well, I think it's not just here in Australia. I've noticed around the world that employee well-being is becoming, I think leaders are realizing more and more and more. You can have fantastic people that you can treat them amazingly, but the idea of people burning out or leaving because of well-being is becoming more and more of an issue. How have you managed that for yourself, and what have you learnt about employee well-being in the workplace as a people leader, and helping? What can we do as leaders? What should we be aware of for managing our own well-being, and how can we invest in that in the people we lead?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I realized it for myself when I was still an individual contributor when I started work. Back then, I thought of myself as, hey, I'm single. I can take work whenever people just ask me to. There was a role that I took that on hindsight, I felt, I think that was a crazy role for me to take on, because it was a 24/7 job, and I really didn't have a backup person. So I was the 24/7. And I think at that time it was okay for me, because I thought, well, I don't really have any obligations outside of work. and I can manage it. But there was a time when I probably lost sleep, lost, like, I can't sometimes like differentiate between night and day because I've been getting calls like at 2 a.m., 4 a.m. In the morning, and still had to do my day job once I get to the office. So it really burned me out to the point where I knew it was enough. Enough was enough, and really then spoke up to my supervisor and boss back then and said, I really need, at least one more people, if not two, because we need to divide 8 hours into like 3 people. And I think that's when I started being more passionate about employees' well-being. So every time I have a conversation as a leader with somebody else, that's like really one of the first questions that I ask is, how are you? And spending a few minutes of the time just understanding how are they as a person, how's their work-life balance, and what is their definition of work-life balance, because it's not necessarily the same for everyone. My definition right now is way different back then. Back then is if I can go out with my friends over the weekend or at night, that's my work-life balance. But now that I have a family, I need to think about my kids' schooling or after school activities, responsibilities at home, and chores as well. So for me now, my ideal work-life balance situation right now is I think where I'm at, wherein I get to start my day early, but also get to end my day early, and then I can handle all the things with my children in the mid-afternoon or onwards to the evening without having to worry too much about work during that time. And I can like just focus my time with my family and not having to fidget myself looking at my cell phone every 10 minutes looking to see, did somebody message me or is there a fire drill? I'm really like at this point where I feel like work-life balance, and this is true also for women who not, both single or both who have families or obligations. That's one thing when I check in with women in the company that I'm at Afiniti, I talk to them about work-life balance and, what is really a priority for you. If you're someone that's aspiring to move up the career ladder, of course, there will be some sacrifices and challenges along the way, but is that something that you are intentional and decided on versus, trying to think that you can have everything sometimes is a dream. And I've realized that the hard way, where I thought, oh, I can be a mother, I can be a great people leader at the same time, and I can be this superwoman. Well, I've seen other people do that. It's not 100% the reality. And just trying to set expectations as well with my peers and my bosses, saying, hey, I have a life outside of work also, and setting expectations with them has helped a lot. And yes. I think where I'm fortunate is that the people that I work with are, whether they're in the same situation that I am or not, but they are well understanding of it, and everybody respects it. And I think it became more apparent actually with the pandemic, where you are working at yes. home, you have kids at home as well. And it became more apparent that people just need to give more grace and be more understanding of the situation where everyone is at. And I think even with my husband, who is also working from home, we also had to help, align on expectations on what he would do versus what I would do and at what time. So there is a balance. There's also work-life balance for him and not just for me.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you manage those conversations with your bosses around expectations, or with other leaders around expectations?
Yeah, so I told them this was probably in the very early stages when I joined the company, and having to ask about working schedules and what's the expectation for working at nights or working on weekends, just for me to level set myself, because I don't want to be expecting that I won't be ever called and them expecting that you should. And fortunately, my boss, who is also a father and has kids, young kids like myself, I said, you know what? You do what you have to do with your family. If you have to take some time off, if you need to take a break, feel free to do that. The only time that he would expect I be at my utmost like focus at work is when we are actually meeting with customers, because it's in a more professional environment, even though it's virtual. And I
Yes.
said, that's totally doable. And, there would be times where I would be traveling when the travel restrictions are over. And I think the level, like the amount of travel, which was very minimal for me, was something that's really acceptable and something that I can pre-plan ahead of time. And so that was something that worked out really well. And so to this day, so I've been in the company for over a year now. To this day, I still feel like I have the ability to decide for myself when I would start and stop working without losing the ball in terms of my deliverables, and without losing the ball in terms of checking in with my team and making sure that they are in good hands, even if I wasn't available.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think for me, I'm always shocked when organizations have a culture, or when people have a perspective where they don't understand that if you have someone who's incredible, if you have someone on your team who is, really brings a humility, is great at leading people, is really excellent at their job. I never understand why organizations don't take a firmer hold of this idea of saying to them, you know what, these are your KPIs, and how you get there, how you spend your time. We believe in you. Let's make it work. And so I'm so happy to hear that's your experience, because
Yeah.
it makes so much sense to me, because it means if you don't have that work-life balance, it doesn't matter how well things are going at work. It does make everything harder, and it can honestly lead to people leaving the company. What have you learned? You mentioned before about women in leadership. What's your perspective on women in leadership in 2021 as a woman in leadership, and like you said, balancing the challenges of being a woman in leadership? I know that's a general topic, but I'll let you sort of take that where you want to take it.
Yeah, sounds good. So I really think that women in leadership deserves much more attention. I mean, it's getting a lot of attention now, but there's still a lot more ways to work on, a lot more things to work on in terms of increasing the number of diversity, what women in particular, but also other minorities within the organization. In the ones that I've been at, in the companies that I've been at, I really can see the distinct um, difference in terms of how women are treated, and
Yes.
also the number of women in leadership positions. So there's definitely a bias in terms of, or double standard, that I can see. And it's everybody in the, I think there is acknowledgement from both women and men that yes, something needs to be done. And
Mm.
there's now, some strides to increase not only women presence in the organization, especially in the technology side. So for example, in the technology organizations, there are women that, if you think about the ratio, there's only 20-30% of women, and then the rest of the 70% are men. And I
Mm.
think, if I think about, the ability of both men and women to thrive and succeed in a company, in a software development company, or in the technology, there's definitely studies that show that women actually excel, if not as equal to men in school, but sometimes they're even, a point or a level higher than with men that, graduate in certain technology courses, which to
Yeah.
me is kind of interesting, figuring out, well, if the women in general, in average statistics, show that they are excelling far more than men, how come it's the opposite scale when you see them in technology organizations?
Mm.
And so there's intent now to increase the hiring or the amount of the number of women in the technology workforce. There's also more, I would say, there's also changes in ways on how we do hiring. Like in the past, you would see everybody's CV or resume, and you would say, okay, you would see their first name. Now there's actually an option to just remove that and just everything anonymize the gender, so you don't actually look at, whether it's a male or a female, just based on the name of what's in the CV. And I'm glad that we have all these questions not to ask during an interview. That helps protect also, and just focus, that helps protect women, and also helps just focus really on what has that person accomplished and what is the potential of that person, coming into the organization. So there's more things that are happening now that I'm really, really proud of. And most recently, I'm part of this group. It's called the Women at Afiniti. And what that really means is it's a group of women who started, a number of initiatives to help encourage engagement of women in the organization, help spread the word and uplift women in terms of their roles, in terms of making sure that they are taken care of. And it was something that was created a few years ago by a group of women, just thinking, how do we increase awareness and help improve women, the morale in the company? Because back then the women men resource allocation was still way, the gap of men and women in the technology company was wider actually than now. And so with that, actually helped create programs that allowed for mentoring, allowed for listening to whether internal or external women speakers about their experiences and how to provide guidance in terms of navigating your career and moving forward in the company. And I think that has really helped a lot, which I'm really proud of. And apart from that, doing some of the outreach activities, like I'm part of this board. I'm a board member of a nonprofit organization called Ignite, which is just primarily created to help bring education and work career opportunities for young girls and non-binary students. And when I asked the founder about it, she said, well, there's already a lot of STEM clubs for men and for young boys, but none necessarily just for young girls. And there were already a lot of like little organizations here and there that was starting up. And she really felt strongly about, let's increase the number of women in the workforce, but we should start it when they are still young and still trying to figure it out. Like, what do they really want to do when they grow up? And giving them the option of understanding what STEM is, what technology is. And so I happily volunteered and, become a member of their board of directors and helping them now actually expand their presence across 20 more cities here in the United States. So that for me is a fulfilling personal mission outside of work. So empowering women is really a passionate topic for me.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you're doing at what you're part of at Ignite. What do you see as for leaders out there who hear this and share your passion around this topic? What can we do? What are some everyday things, or what that you're seeing at the moment, or a change in perspective, or a little shift that can make a difference in how we treat and how we empower and how we invest in women leaders?
I think one is, look at your organization for now as a leader. How do you think about the diversity of your group? And if there is no diversity at all, then acknowledge that there isn't, and work with your HR partners or with your other peer leaders to find a way to increase the diversity. Think about your organization who has shown potential, and not really think about their their backgrounds and gender. So if you think about it from an objective way, regardless of whether you're male, female, non-binary, think about how has this person really excelled in the role, and would I, if I had a way to reorganize my team, how would that look like from that perspective? And when I actually did that exercise a few years ago with my team and realized how how much how much there were there were lack of opportunities for the women in my team that I inherited, but they were excelling a lot, and they were just not given the proper attention, care, and feeding that I would have, that anyone like their previous supervisors, previous organizations should have given them.
Yeah.
And just providing that focus, even if it's just one person. So investing on that person, which later on will prove to be fruitful, because that one person can pay it forward to the next two people, and the next two people can pay it forward to more people. And I think when that person actually, I've invested a lot of that time with that, with that woman that was initially an individual contributor. She started at the mid-range individual contributor role, but she had so much potential and was just not given that much attention. And when I focused and worked with her in terms of how to grow her career, she now has like the highest role that a person could ever attain in that company right now as an individual contributor. And she really just wanted to become an individual contributor, which I highly respect. And could she be a people leader? Absolutely, yes. But her desire was to stay there and help her achieve her max potential, which I think if anyone, as a people leader, just having that second look and allowing yourself to be acknowledge that there are some gaps with you as a leader, and trying to correct that slowly, and not necessarily overnight, but slowly and surely look at the people that actually show potential and promise and work with that person. I would say, like, using the Pareto principle of 80%, you should focus your time on the high performers, but make sure that you are unbiased when looking at them. And that will reap a lot of benefits for sure.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. One of the things I often do with teams and with leaders is we do a bit of a chart of the people in their team, sometimes in their wider team, so a couple of levels across that they're leading, and we go through mainly focusing on the core values. If I've worked with an organization on their core values, but also there's a great book by Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player. I don't know if you've come across that book, but he talks about these three traits: humble, hungry, and people smart. And humble being humility, hungry, that sort of drive and going above and beyond naturally, which often people have instilled to them from a young age. And people smart, that emotional intelligence, EQ. And one of the things I love to do is to get people to just map out, for their people, where they think some of their people are really strong in these areas, like humility. Who are some people who are really, really strong in humility, and those who it's a bit of a struggle. They tend to silo a bit, or they struggle to admit their weaknesses. And one of the fascinating things of doing that exercise is because you stop and it's obviously something you never share with. It's something I do privately with the leader, and then it's not shared with everyone. That's not the point of it. But the point is to open their eyes to people that they may have underestimated, because there'll often be someone who really ticks these different boxes, but for some reason, and I think that's the thing about bias, isn't it? You don't know, because the whole point of bias is that you don't know how you have it. And sometimes there'll be someone or a couple of people where one of two things happens. They either go, that's I can't, I don't know why, but I've just never really focused in on them. But they are really strong in terms of who we are as an organization, but also they're really humble. They're very driven. They're very hungry, and they're really great. They're emotionally intelligent. They know when they're not the sort of person who makes messes and sort of offends people and doesn't realize it. They tend to be quite good at picking up what people are thinking and how they're going. And then vice versa. Sometimes there'll be people where they go, we had this person on a track for leadership, and maybe it's just because they're competent, right? They're a great individual contributor. But when you look at these other traits that often I think make a great leader, they're not really in line with some of the values of the company, and they really need to grow a lot in humility, or when it comes to how people smart, emotional intelligence. And it's funny how people always assume when they're doing that exercise that nothing new will come out of it. But I love what you said there, because it's a similar thing. It's like when you look objectively at your people, if you can try to take a step back and see them differently in terms of their potential, right? Take off the bias, take off the normal lens. It's surprising how you can realize, like you did with your team, there are some people here who are amazing. And for some reason, we haven't been investing in them as much as we could have. So I really love that. That's
I love the fact that you mentioned about humility. That actually is something that I haven't really included in assessing people, but that is such an important trait. Like you want to be able to work with people who actually are both good, of course, but also have that sense of awareness that they're not always perfect or the best, and there's always room for improvement, and that humility stands out a lot, which I'm coming to realize also that a lot of leaders may not necessarily be humble themselves, and that's probably part of the bias.
Yeah, it is. There's a great saying, which is that pride blinds. And I think that's one of the biggest problems if you struggle with pride. I think when and I mean, we all struggle with pride at different levels, and we all have our triggers of things where we go, it's really hard to admit that I dropped the ball there or have a weakness there. But if someone really has struggles with a lack of humility, I think the biggest challenge is they're often blind to it, because it's actually that very thing so they literally may not be aware of that. And so I think you're right and that's really hard when you're leading up to a leader who's got that challenge. I think, and I work with a lot of leaders where that's the case, and I'm always a little bit stuck for words, because it's such a challenging. It just makes every communication. It just adds this sort of taint to everything you do that makes it harder, and makes it unpredictable, and it makes connection more difficult. Because, so I agree. I think it's so important. Well, Lindsay, this has been so much fun. I've so enjoyed chatting with you. As we land now, did you have any final thoughts for anyone listening?
Yeah, again, thank you for the opportunity here. I've been learning a lot through our conversations as well, and I'm hoping that the listeners out there have gotten little nuggets of insights from our discussion. And really, I just want to thanks for the opportunity and making sure that, hopefully leaders out there or anyone else can get something out of this.
Yeah, I think they definitely will. I think your stories, and I think your story from where you've come from, and how, sharing about your time in Poland, I think so much of that was so relatable, and I think it will be a really big encouragement to people listening, and hopefully, as with your not-for-profit, for women who might be listening, who might be realizing even themselves they've had a bias against themselves in leadership, and to go, maybe I could do that, or maybe I need to find somewhere else where I am valued, or because I love your perspective on that as well. So thank you, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. I really appreciate you. The heart of everything we do with Clarity is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be, and to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work at and that customers line up to buy from. That's really the heart of everything we do. And this podcast is really about investing in you. And so I just want to take a moment to thank you for listening, and also ask, if you haven't already, if you'd consider following, subscribing. And if you really enjoyed this episode with Lindsay Hua, then why don't you share this with your network, with a friend, because that really helps us to get the word out and to help more leaders to become the very best they can be. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And you know, my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jono White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.